everyone. Welcome back to our episode of Sugar, Spice, and Everything Chaos. We have been very grateful that you've been enjoying the season so far and for all the comments and likes and the support that you've been giving. So, for today's episode, we have something that is extremely important to talk about, that is relevant to what is happening in today's scenario, because we see a lot of news that's coming up against women, oppression and abuse that's happening against women in the form of TV serials or in the form of news, in the form of a lot of things that has been coming in our, feed. So I thought it is important to talk about this. So today we are going to talk about a very age-old reference that we always hear is called daughter versus over a divorced daughter. So before we start the discussion, Pauline, what do you think of this topic?
I think this is also in continuation with the previous episode, right? So the previous episode we were talking about how marriage is should be an optional thing. It doesn't really make sense for marriage to be a compulsion where if you're married, you're someone who's considered successful or not. So continuing on with that sort of narrative where now we reflect on, if marriage is optional, then why are people choosing it and then getting divorced? Because see, we I think are not really uh, supporters or endorsers of divorce because we don't want that. But then ultimately divorce is something that's needed, that's required, because a lot of people get married for wrong reasons. So I think we are going to discuss a little bit about how marriage is not really the problem per se, but it's the reasons we get married that could be indicative of problematic marriages. So and maybe I'll ask this question to you now. Why do you think marriages fail? Because we discussed this in the previous episode. Marriages are not really fundamentally the problem, it's the people that are involved. So, why do you think people fail at marriage?
So I think before we try to understand why marriages fail, I think it is important to understand why marriage came into existence in the first place. So you see how marriage is actually a social survival system, right? It's not for romance. It was not brought for companionship. It was brought so that this particular drama that happens, the marriage drama that happens, that favors the society and the survival of the society, right? So in terms of this marriage drama, you see how women and men are being put into this role play at a very young age. Even in the loneliness episode, we spoke about how as soon as a girl attains puberty, they are being put into the marriage market, and they are being mentally prepared into believing that their whole existence is so that they can go into a different family, and this family does not belong to you at all. That's the kind of conversation you see. She will go into a different family and you don't belong to this family at all. And even for men, that they are just expected to claim these women. So I feel like this whole aspect of the marriage drama in itself is something that we need to start questioning, because right now marriages fail because many of these things were considered normal, but right now women are trying to talk about what is happening inside these closed doors within a marriage, which was normalized before. It is not normalized anymore, because for example dowry or marital rape or abuse or domestic violence, these are something that women are coming out and talking about. So this no entry zone that is coming out into the open, probably that is the reason right now marriages are failing.
Hmm. Do you think people who talk about these things, the reason why do you think they're suddenly talking about it? Because for so long it's been considered taboo, right? So what do you think has changed that women are now finally coming forward and talking about things that are absolutely not a good thing to talk about? Because I think as much as talking about these things are changing things for women, it's also like a character flaw, right? Where I know like a bunch of my friends who, when they got married, they were given this advice from their parents and even like their in-laws, where they said, see, you're getting married now, which means that family affairs become a little bit more complex. There would be obviously good things and bad things about each person in the family, and you are expected to not put out personal information outside. So they kind of make a deal with the daughter-in-law, the woman who is getting married, uh, beforehand, where in a very systematic way. They kind of prime her into believing that if she does leak any information that's like that could be considered bad for reputation, right? She is immediately a woman with no character. So, like, this is just the truth of the family. But if some information goes out after she gets married into the family, then somehow, right, the expectation or the weight of the, like, protection of the pristine, whatever they have, the family name they have, falls on the newly married bride. So now that we're talking about it, we no longer kind of associate ourselves with that sort of weight. And I think that's shifting. So why do you think that shift even started to happen?
Um, I think one thing is definitely the kind of education and exposure women have right now. I believe that is one thing that we as women, we right now just don't gossip, but I think we gossip with purpose. I guess even with our,
Mm.
I think I'm trying to gossip. Gossip has always been in among women for a longer, centuries, right? So women like to gather
Yeah.
around and talk about things that is happening in their households, what's happening with their families and husbands and troubles and things like that. It's a very common quality. And I think I remember a scene from Bridgerton as well, that the mama will come and say that,
Mm.
we'll women do what we are great at, which is gossip. And it becomes a thing that saves sort of a very troubled situation. But I think right now women just don't gossip for the sake of gossiping or complaining. They gossip with purpose. They gossip to know whether what I'm doing is right or not. I guess I come to my girlfriends and I tell them, okay, this is a problem I have with my relationship. And they would do like a, vibe check into thinking, okay, is this guy really right or am I delusional? I guess this is the kind of talk that we are having. Probably because of that we are able to talk about it and not hide it. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with that completely. I think, for the longest of time, right, even because of like the religious upbringing that we have, we've always seen gossip as a negative thing. But rather, gossip is a great way not just for venting and like having a cathartic moment, but also to kind of sit and assess the situation. Wait, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. So, what should be done? And when we talk about it with people, they also kind of share their experiences, and that's basically wisdom sharing, right? And I think women are just great at wisdom sharing. If we are able to find circles where it's a safe space, it's amazing. I think, like this wisdom sharing that we do is somehow saving us. And what that looks like on the statistics front is that the divorce rates are going up. As much as this looks like a downfall for civilization, I think this is a great thing for a shift with the way that we're going to move forward as a civilization, because now we're going to be more friendly towards women. We're going to have probably more equality in terms of status and parity. So, moving forward, I think one question that we need to kind of address is with the parents, where we need to ask ourselves, like, ask the parents this question as to why they think women are so, I mean, their daughters are so dispensable. Because I think one of the problems with the arranged marriage system is the fact that parents look at their daughters as liabilities, as this, like, this is my child, but this child is not really going to keep my name or continue my legacy. So it doesn't matter, I just have to get her married to someone, forget about her. But like one thing that you see with like a current societal situation is a lot of parents post retirement are depending on their daughters more than their sons. The
Mm.
sons are married off because nuclear family systems are the norm right now. You see that it's the daughters who are taking care of the the grandparent generation. And it's very funny that like this is something that they casually take for granted, where you no longer have the power to ask questions to your daughter-in-law, but then you see that the daughters do not mind coming back and taking care of the parents. So I don't know, I feel like the sort of blindsidedness from parents is something we need to question, because what gave you the audacity to even believe that it'll be the son who'll save you in your last days? Because you will see this sort of trend, especially when they're grow in their growing years, where the parents wouldn't hesitate to spend big money on their sons for education, for exposure, internships, everything. They would give like big money for anything the son wants to do, even like investments when it comes to their vehicles and things, right? Video games, whatever. If the son wants it, you get it. But with the daughter, they hesitate so much to spend on her, even if it's just for something as basic as her health or her education, because there's that like thing that's going on in the background of their mind where it's like, anyway, this girl is not going to serve me in the future. She's going to go and serve some other family. But
Hmm.
like now we see the shift where we clearly see daughters are the ones who are taking care of the
Taking care.
family, yet we still do not take care of our own daughters. Why is that?
One thing I wanted to add on from the previous conversation is also about this gossip with purpose that we are right now doing. I think women are also right now having a lot of varieties of, standards, because at that time, women only had one reference, which is family life, make a baby, stay with the family, don't get divorced, withstand the abuse and all of that. But right now, you see different varieties of women, and there are women who are divorced, there are women who are single, there are women who are traveling, there are women who are doing all kinds of things. And I think when we look at them and they say, okay, they are happy, why can't I choose happiness? I think that is also a question that is coming inside the minds of the daughters. And we are let's come back to the parent side. See, again, that is a very relevant conversation as well. Like, it makes me remember about my own mother, right? So they had two daughters and two sons, but of course that disparity between daughters and sons were there growing up. But you saw that my grandfather was suffering from illness, and my mother was the one who had to take care of him, and he did not like her. And but then after she took care of him in his, deathbed, and during the last times, he started having, sort of like a soft spot for her. But even then, there was nobody who cared about what was happening with her. She was on medication, she was also not well, and all of that. And then nobody looked at her and said, okay, she's not well, she's also suffering a lot. But they took advantage of her availability and the fact that she wants to be there for the father because she loved the father, right? And I think you see in a lot of families, daughters have this sort of this, regardless of what it is, they have this love for the parents, but they're also hate for the parents. For example, the Mother Mary comes to me, Arundita Roy. I think that's what happens in many daughters as well, the disparity. A woman who is able to give you love, a family where you can show love, at the same time they have been the one who hurt you the most, that kind of a
Yeah.
dissonance. But daughters tend to look past what they've done to them, and they tend to look at them with sympathy or empathy, and they tend to take care of them. And I feel like a lot of you parents are taking advantage of the fact that the woman or the daughter is having that soft spot for you. And you know deep down that your daughter would come and take care of you regardless of how you're going to treat her, right? Probably that is the faith that they have, that they are taking advantage. I don't know. That's what I feel.
I think this is not just true for parents, this is also true for husbands, and even children for that matter. Like when it's the mother, right, there is that sort of casual, cruelty that happens where they know that at the end of the day, a woman's weakness is love. They call it weakness, right?
Hmm.
So as long as you kind of go back and apologize, the woman would be accepting of you. And I think one huge shift that's happening is women setting boundaries today. And as we are setting boundaries, we're saying, yes, I'm capable of unconditional love, but then I'm choosing not to love you right now because loving you is hurting me. And when we kind of make this huge shift in perspective, right? I think this empowers us to finally pour the love that we have within us into ourselves. And that means that, like you said, it could mean just traveling around, it could mean just making friends with people that we wouldn't have otherwise, traveling the world. Making businesses into reality, serving communities, serving the world, saving the planet, being eco-friendly. It could be so many things because we women are so capable. Like our intelligence has so far been contained within the bounds of the family life. But now that we're finally able to see that, transactional relationships is how the world works. So why not be transactional with our love as well? I think there is a shift that's happening. But, this is also kind of making, the whole monetization of loneliness possible, right? So as much as success and fame and all those things are nice, we're also kind of cultivating a generation where all of us are extremely lonely. But before, the loneliness was somehow managed because women were extremely kind enough to hand out love for free. But now that women are no longer doing that, it's almost like suffocation at this point, because where's the love in this world anymore? We have kind of reached the point where cruelty is the norm, exploitation is the norm, and we're literally on the verge of World War III right now. It's like nowhere in society today do you actually have like any reason to kind of continue on with like a zest for life, because everywhere you look it's like, it's exhausting, what are we doing, the government is messed up, the market is messed up, our family systems are messed up. So we also need to kind of talk about the future direction of things. One thing that I think we've also discussed in the previous episode is something that we could kind of recollect. It's this thing of like how we failed our men. A lot of men are just boys still. So that's something that we need to definitely look into. But like, how do we go about this? Because we know that, we cannot make this positive impact of a shift happen without men. We need men. So, how do you kind of imagine a marriage situation where it's no longer about social or societal security and development, but rather something that has to do with personal fulfillment?
Hmm. See, this brings me to the question of, again, the expectations and things that is put upon a male child versus a female child, right? And I think many of the women right now are understanding that control over it. Like you see a lot of boy mothers, the current mothers, are teaching equality to the children, and they don't have that disparity that was happening previously in previous generation. I think as parents, you see that many men do blame their mothers first, and then they end up blaming their partners, then they end up blaming the situation. There's always something that men tend to put the hand and say, okay, I'm not good because this is happening, I'm not good because the world is ending, I'm not good because there's a recession. There's no ownership that is coming from men in the first place, and this ownership does not come as and when you just get old, right? Because you see the difference in parenting between a male and a female. Like females, we have been made to be perfect from a very young age, right? We had to be good at it. You see this thing narrative very consistently. If you want to be equal to a guy, you have to be great at it, you have to be 10 steps ahead. Only then they will respect you. You can't be equal to a man, you have to be 10 steps ahead. So you see, even in exams, we used to, women, girl child used to cry if they are 98 out of 100. So boy child will be like, they'll be 35 and they'll be very happy about their marks. And you see this consistency in work, in marriage, because women have this timeline that they've been given to them around 20 to 23. By that, they need to have their shit together, right? But men have the ability to go with the flow. And because boys will be boys, let them just do whatever they want as long as they bring money somehow, or they're able to survive. That's it, right? But that kind of lifestyle has not been given to females, right? We can't just survive, we had to be very perfect, we can't even have a break here, we can't even make any mistakes, right? And I see this even in my families between men and women, and men child and women child, and how they are thriving. One is thriving on survival and pressure and all of that, other one is like, just life, let's just chill, sort of a thing. So I think that is the one, the parenting difference is the one that parents have to take it into consideration. Otherwise, if you're going to go at this rate, not teaching your boys to take ownership, not teaching your boys emotionally regulate themselves, without having you to support them, protect them, cushion them all the time, you're not going to be there with them 10 years, 20 years down the line, and they are going to expect the daughter-in-laws, your daughter-in-laws, to do it for them. And that is going to be a very pathetic situation. The daughter-in-law will not stay. Right now nobody stays, and they will just leave, and your son will be left alone, right? That is something that you really, all of you need to understand. It's not a blame game. It is something that is very practically a human being should be developed in a particular way, and men are right now not developed at all.
I think, as hard as this sounds, I think we need to really understand that men or women are not born in isolation. We are born within systems, and these systems have to change if we need to get somewhere with life. And the systems can only change. We make up the system, right? The system did not just magically come one day. So we need to kind of understand that traditions are basically useless. This reminds me of an analogy that I once came across where it spoke about how, this mother would see this have this practice because her mother would do this thing where she would cut chicken into half and then she would put the chicken into the oven and then roast it, and then years later, like almost decades later, her own daughter would ask her mother, why do you cut the chicken before you kind of roast it? And the mother would say, that's how it's done, so that's what you have to do. But the daughter would not be satisfied, because for the daughter, it wouldn't make sense, because like, why would you have to cut it? Because does it add flavor? Does it do this? And the mother would be like, don't question it, because this is how it's always been done. But the daughter would not be satisfied, so she would call her grandmother, and then she would be like, hey, so this is what mom's doing, but like, why do we cut the chicken in our family? Because in my friend's house they don't cut it, and the chicken tastes good, so why do we in our family cut the chicken before we roast it? And the grandmother would say, actually have an explanation. It would not be something that's meaningless. She would say, we had to cut it because the oven that we used back in the day was very small and the chicken would not fit into it, so we had to cut it just so that space was enough. So now, the granddaughter takes it to her mother and says, see, this is what grandmama said. And then the entire family realizes that tradition is actually just nonsense if you follow it blindly. So our grandmothers, our great grandmothers had to do certain things because they didn't have an option, right? But now when we have an option and we still follow it in the name of tradition and in the name of legacy or some crappy logic like that, we need to sit and question ourselves, like, where is our critical thinking, where is our ability to use our prefrontal cortex? Because I understand it's easy to conform to whatever you're used to. And, unfortunately, parents also expect that, right? I did this, so you also do this. And this is like our family thing and all that. There is that, like, what do you say, that cohesion, that sort of bonding that we feel when someone is similar to us. But similar at what cost? Like, your father hit your mother and now your husband hits you. How is that romantic? How is that how is it that as a collective we are able to label that as love?
See,
It
I
doesn't make
think
sense.
tradition again, it's the normalcy, right? What's the norm is again a very
Yeah.
bad thing to follow, because I think we are clinical psychologists and we remember the statistics of what considers as a diagnosis. It depends on the norm actually. And you see, this brings me to the question of, see, we as in this generation, we understand the tradition is something that is illogical. We understand that, but we also see women, just regardless of the education and the critical thinking they've developed, the only way forward they see is to die. Like you saw the dowry case that's been happening, recently, and the number of deaths that's been happening. And that makes me question, like, regardless of what we have come forward to, we still choose to die. We still choose all of these traditions and want to fit into it. And it makes me question, does parents really prefer a dead daughter over a divorced daughter? Is that what they want? Because dowry during those times, if you see, it actually started as it's called striden at that time. It started as a thing where it was supposed to be a inheritance substitute for women, because women at that time could not own properties. So what they used to do is they used to give gift jewelries and land and property and all of that as gifts to the daughters when they get married, so that it serves as a financial security for them. And the control over the property, the land, and the money would stay over the daughter legally. That's how it started. But right now, it has come to a place where it's being used to exploit a woman, not just exploit a woman, exploit the whole family, and use that to control her, use that, as basically they are buying the daughter, right? Like, I don't understand how dare they do this, because see, at this generation, your son's getting a daughter in itself is a miracle, considering statistically the male to female ratio and the kind of women who don't want to, deal with all of these unhealthy men as well. The fact that you're getting a woman who's willing to, adjust to your thing, at the same time be able to love your son, is itself is a big thing. And on top, you're expecting to be paid in lump sum to marry your sons. That doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, I think like, one of the things that we need to kind of educate our daughters on, the young women on, is see, we get it. You're very passionate, you don't deserve this. So you would rather, live a life that has love in it, or you would quit. But there are alternatives to, ending your life. For instance, you could just run away, you could start over. There are plenty of resources for women that's available. There are NGOs that are specifically functioning today for women who need support, right? Where if your own family, like I know of cases where women, when they want to like be with their boyfriends, right, but then the caste issue and other things come up, the parents, they put her under like a lockdown situation where where she's not allowed to leave. So I know of this one woman who went on to contact an NGO, and those NGO people were able to kind of help rescue her from her own parental home. And they gave her proper protection, legal protection, until she got married to the person that she loved. And now she's, living a happy life, and, they have children together, and it's beautiful. But see, I think a lot of women do not know of such resources. Even if you didn't have a boyfriend who you wanted, to start a life with, you can still you still have education. Thankfully, girl education becoming compulsory is such a blessing in disguise. As unfortunate as it is that it took us so many years to get here, but it is a blessing in disguise. So the compulsory thing, a lot of women kind of crib about how they didn't really want to be career women and all that, but like money is your power, children. Money is amazing. So like use that money to build a life for yourself. Right now we see trends on Instagram where a lot of women are like coming up and saying, I did something, and then they kind of show a key and they say, I bought my first home. And it's so beautiful to see that, because usually, like maybe even like 5 years to 10 years back, we saw trends where women were showing off their rings and saying, I got a man. And that was the huge accomplishments that a woman can do for herself, right? But now it's like, I bought my own house, I bought my own car, I bought my own things, I built my own PC, I am able to develop my own apps. So when I see content like this on the internet, it just makes me so happy, because women are just thriving, women are just happy, and these women still want love. They want pure love. And I think a lot of women are getting that through friendship more than through romantic relationships, because like men, you need to get better. You really do, because if you did get better, I don't think you would be so lonely anymore. Like, Anne was saying, take ownership. If you need advice, if you need like some push towards getting better, go for therapy, not gym. Go for gym as well, but like go to therapy. Like therapy would give you some perspectives. Read books that are, not revolving around men. Read books that are like bell hooks. You have, like female authors which would like who would tell you what exactly we are thinking. I think one of the excuses that men have is like, we cannot satisfy women, and we cannot understand women. Only try more, because we've understood you, we know exactly what you want, and we don't want what you want.
See, the only example I would give is somebody from fifth standard would not be able to understand matrix and trigonometry. So that's the kind of analogy I would give.
Yeah, like we again don't want to sound mean, but this is just the way reality is right now, and we're very disappointed with how things are, and we do hope to change. I think we do want to end this episode on like a hopeful note. Uh, Women, reach out before you decide to do something extreme, because like your life matters, whether you're with a man, whether you're not with a man, whether you with like 5 men, 10 men, doesn't matter. Your life is valuable, like that it's valuable, period. And yeah. And Anything else
And
to add?
yeah, and I think I want to address to the parents that, especially the mothers. See, I understand that things have been done to you, but you need to understand you're being the huge enforcers of this patriarchy, because I guess you are only aware of this patriarchy. But right now, your daughters have a chance to be free, chance to be happy, chance to be alive and fully alive and not just serve someone else. So I guess it is not just your duty to marry your daughter off, get her educated, give her, put gold for her and collect property for her. That is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be there for her no matter what. And if your daughter is suffering and she's coming back to your family, it is important that you are standing beside her, not pushing her behind and say, adjust, 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 because that is not the way to go forward. And I believe that nobody wants dead daughters, and we don't want dead daughters either. So let's just create a world where it's really peaceful and happy, and we don't have to follow the tradition of cutting the chicken just because you couldn't fit during that time. We now have the space to fit, so let us fit. So I guess with that, we want to end today's episode, and we will see you again for the next episode. We do share your comments, your thoughts, your feedback, and don't comment about the color of our lipsticks. So, so we will see you again for the next episode. Until next time, bye.
Bye.